Stonehenge. 4,000 years ago, our ancestors raised this mysterious monument. And still, we don't know why. There have been plenty of theories. They were astronomers, engineers, priests. They built an observatory, a temple, even an alien landing strip. But now there's another idea, a theory that seeks to reveal which powerful desires drove Stone Age Britons to their greatest achievement. It's a story which stretches across continents and millennia. A story of life, death, and fertility. Dawn at Stonehenge. It's midsummer, when the days are at their longest, when the dawn will cast its rays into the heart of the stone circle. At this time of year, the sun rises directly behind the famous heel stone standing outside the circle. But today, an artificial sun shines down. A scientific experiment using a massive 18-kilowatt spotlight to illuminate a controversial theory. Dr. Terence Meaden is a physicist. He thinks he can demonstrate why Stonehenge was built. Dr. Meaden's theory is that this was the site of a symbolic sexual act. Two ancient deities, a marriage of the gods.
The marriage of the gods is a cosmic consummation between two fertility deities, seen here as the sun god and the earth goddess. What we're seeing at Stonehenge is the sun shining past the heelstone straight into the womb of Stonehenge. Then the sun moves to a position where it is concealed behind the heelstone. We then have the phenomenon happening. The shadow of the heelstone penetrates the monument and gives a consummation effect. A fertility ceremony happening in front of the spectators who would have been watching all this. This experiment's gone so well, we're delighted. All the calculations have worked out beautifully. We spent some time in advance working out just where the artificial sun should be placed. Everything has come out exactly as expected.
Britain was a warmer and sunnier place in Stone Age times. People who gathered here around the time of the summer solstice had a good chance of seeing a clear sunrise. Dr. Meaden's personal theory is that the stones were positioned to ensure that a phallic shadow would penetrate the inner sanctum of Stonehenge. The tip of the shadow fell across the monument's most sacred stone, the one he calls the Goddess Stone. This female figure, seated on her throne of leopards, was already 4,000 years old when Stonehenge was built. She was made in Turkey, which was once the cradle of Western civilization. Did the Stonehenge builders dedicate their work to someone like her, a goddess of motherhood, of fertility, of the earth? The search for hard evidence of goddess worship in Britain has become Terence Meaden's lifelong obsession. But it's a highly controversial idea, which leaves most archaeologists sceptical.
I don't think there's any evidence for the cult of the goddess in Britain, which doesn't mean there couldn't have been something of this sort, but if so, There are no images of her which we can accept as authentic. That's the big problem.
The Neolithic, or New Stone Age, began in Britain around 6,000 years ago. Neolithic people were the first monumental builders, beginning with huge communal tombs for their dead, like the West Kennet Long Barrow, 20 miles from Stonehenge. The New Stone Age people were the first in Britain for whom the fertility and cultivation of the earth became a matter of life and death.
Neolithic people were the first farmers in Britain, and they were obsessed with the fertility of the land and with reproduction. And it's in this period that the idea of Mother Earth, I think, first comes to the fore. I think in the Neolithic period the Earth was increasingly being seen as female, but that was because it was being seen increasingly as something that would produce, that would yield, that you could drive a plough into.
As farmers, the Neolithic people were developing a new concern with the seasons of life: sowing, harvesting, storing. The long barrows they built to house their dead tell the same cyclical story: a growing preoccupation with death and rebirth. For Terence Meaden, the link to the Earth Goddess is clear. Here, at the chambered tomb of Hetty Pegler's Tump, northwest of Stonehenge, he thinks our ancestors saw the body of the Earth Mother, burying their dead in a tomb which was also a womb.
What do you think about the meaning of the word tump?
Well, I guess people in the 17th century saw it as a great big pregnant belly in the landscape.
Archaeologist Tim Taylor disagrees with Dr Meaden on many details, but he does support the idea that these tombs were built to resemble wombs.
All over Britain, mounds just like this one are constructed, and they're very womb-like. They have a passage that's like a vagina, and they have lobes into which the dead are put, and they are humped up in the landscape. 3 of the 5 chambers are still open.
The most important cell must be the one in which I'm sitting right here, because this is the end cell of the gallery. Looking ahead, we have the vulva entrance, the vagina gallery, and the cell straight at the end, this vast one here, is the womb cell into which I would guess the most recently dead body would have been placed.
This was a family burial plot. Deep inside the chambers, many of the skeletons were incomplete, for the living used the bones of the dead in rituals, bringing them in and out of the tomb at times of ceremonial importance. For Tim Taylor, they're enacting a symbolic rebirth from the tomb and the womb.
I think that symbolism of a womb and a vagina is broadly inescapable, but there's an architectural tradition here as well. They're putting them up over several hundred years with these side chambers. When the dead are brought in here and then moved around, they are being put in to Mother Earth, if you like, and that idea is emerging in the Neolithic period. Whether it's related to some grand mother goddess, though, I have my doubts.
Oh, that's quite another matter. The Earth Mother, though, was something which seemed to be quasi-universal throughout the entire Neolithic world.
This type of monument ties in perfectly with a belief system that women were just there for reproduction. It's showing a womb-shaped monument in the earth, can receive dead bodies and will hold the ancestors within the earth from which they can be reborn. And it's rather like scattering seed onto a harrowed field which will produce crops in the new year. They're scattering bones into this vulva here in order to reproduce the ancestors.
Terence Meaden's theory is based on his own individual interpretation of the shape and design of Stonehenge.
Stonehenge was built as a temple to the earth goddess. All these stones represent, in one way or another, the organs of generation of the earth goddess. The first trilithon arch is wider than all the others. This is the volva of the monument. Inside, we reach the first pair of stones, which are regardable as the cervix stones. And inside this, we have the uterus. There is fertility symbolism here everywhere. You see it in every one of these trilithon settings with their narrow slits. At the heart of the monument, at the focus, we have the goddess stone. When this was standing upright, it stood here, and it was 4 meters high.
What Dr Meaden calls the goddess stone is more commonly known as the altar stone. Once it stood upright at the very centre of the monument. It's the only example here of micaceous sandstone, an unusual rock which glitters in the sunshine. It fell into ruin many centuries ago, but for Dr Meaden, it is the symbol of Mother Earth. In the marriage of the gods, this was the bride. For professional archaeologists, there remains a problem with Meaden's theory, a hole in the evidence. For if our ancestors were inspired by a goddess cult, they left no clear image of her in Britain. Aubrey Burl, Britain's foremost expert on stone circles, has made a careful study of the geometry of alignments at Stonehenge. He dismisses theories of Stonehenge as a complex astronomical device.
There are just 2 very simple sight lines here. One, as I look here towards the heel stone, the stone that stands outside Stonehenge, just to the left of it is where the sun would rise at midsummer. Just turning round and aligning to the southwest, that is in line with the midwinter sunset.
Twin alignments, clearly marking the cycle of the seasons and the Earth's fertility. Midsummer sunrise, celebrating the peak of the growing period. Diametrically opposite, midwinter sunset, marking the darkest moment before life may begin to return. Which alignment was most important to the builders of Stonehenge? Terence Meaden's theory of the marriage of the gods makes him choose the warmth and hope of midsummer sunrise.
The key alignment is the midsummer sunrise alignment, because this celebrates life and fertility.
Aubrey Burl chooses the opposite because the stones are tallest in the direction of the midwinter sunset.
The midwinter sunset alignment is even more important than the midsummer sunrise alignment, which had gone before it. It's the death of the year. And I can imagine here in the centre of Stonehenge, in the darkness with torches burning away and light flickering on these stones, people must have wanted desperately to make the world turn back into warmth when things would grow.
Britain's largest stone circle, Avebury, stands 20 miles north of Stonehenge. It's about the same age and may be full of fertility symbolism.
So all these stones, Terry, have a sexuality for you?
Every one of them, and largely it derives from the fact that they were specially selected, brought here, they had a meaning for the people at the time, and we are reading back the meaning they put into them.
Right.
Dr. Terence Meaden's highly individual theories are too extreme for most experts on the Neolithic. But archaeologist Mike Pitts believes in keeping an open mind.
So Terry, they're bringing, according to your theory, hundreds of these stones down off the hills, male and female. This is pretty heavy sex. I mean, what's in the minds of the people? Why are they doing this?
Dr Meaden believes Neolithic Britons found sexual significance in each stone. That the tall ones are male, the broad ones female.
It's an idea that's actually embedded in academic archaeology. There is an old idea that was actually created by a conventional and excellent archaeologist in the 1960s, that the two different shapes of stone are representing male and female. Terry, you've brought me to these two stones in the avenue that you wanted to show me. What are you going to tell me?
Well, I want to emphasise that the story of Avebury is the story of people and their religion, and the fertility
disagree with that, yeah.
and a fertility religion at that.
Right.
And this is why the people, in my opinion, put sexuality into the stones, and why, if we're clever enough now, we can read the sexuality back out.
Okay, sounds fun. Show me.
Here we have a stone which is far taller than it is wide, and it is a classic male stone. Those which are broader than they are high are likely to be female.
Right. There's a sexuality in the stone.
Initially, one makes the academic statement, but when you come to live with the stones, and I'm visiting them so much, when you come to really know them very well, yes, you feel the same power. And this was put into them by the people who made them. Indeed.
It's completely theoretical. If you actually statistically analyse the stones, there are not two types. We're picking out extremes. And maybe they are female, maybe they're male, maybe there's something else. Maybe one's red and one's white. Maybe one's dark, night, light, death. There are all sorts of oppositions other than male and female. Do you feel a female sexuality coming out?
Yes, I do feel such a thing coming back. And then it's all the more powerful by being set opposite this one.
Right.
Now, that's a very masculine stone.
Dr Meaden is not the first enthusiast to find his own meanings in Britain's mysterious stone circles. It's been said that every age gets the Stonehenge it desires or deserves. The 17th century architect Inigo Jones saw a classical temple. To the Victorians, it was a sacrificial altar of the Druids. In the hippie 1960s, an astronomical calendar, or a landing strip for alien visitations. Throughout human history, the development of an agricultural lifestyle has led to a higher birth rate and a more restricted role for women. If there was a marriage of the gods, it's unlikely it was an equal partnership. Yet Terence Meaden proposes that it was the central ceremony of Neolithic belief, not just at Stonehenge, but at Avebury too. Here too, he identifies one stone as the goddess stone, the centre of the ritual circle.
We have here a vulva-like arrangement with possibly a clitoris here, and the fact that it was put here, facing this direction, is the significant thing. In short, there is this vulva mark here, a very powerful feminine symbol indeed.
Many of the original stones which made up the Avebury Circle have vanished, but a computer model which includes the lost stones reveals a single stone which once towered above the rest. The missing obelisk. For Terence Meaden, this was the phallic stone of the bridegroom.
The most important stone of the stone circle was the goddess stone. At the centre of the circle was a stone which is no longer here. The obelisk is now marked by this concrete pillar, but it used to stand here 18 feet high. At the start of May in every year, the sun, in rising over the hill, cast a vast shadow which went from the obelisk right through to the goddess stone. The stone was therefore enveloped in shade. That was the marriage of the gods.
To test his theory at Avebury, Dr Meaden reconstructs the lost obelisk in its original position.
It's a bit of a pointed top, you see.
Professor Ronald Hutton of Bristol University, an eminent authority on ancient religions, has agreed to observe the experiment. Dr Meaden's theory is too narrowly based on sex for most archaeologists to accept, but some of its elements do appeal to Professor Hutton.
There's a lot of mileage to Terence's idea. The idea that phallic symbols are important in the Neolithic is well borne out. The idea of there being something sacred in sex is also found. You put this lot together and it can actually come into one season all right.
The builders are working to a drawing of the obelisk made by the 18th century scholar William Stukely, who measured many of the stones at Avebury.
We're fortunate in having a drawing made by Stukely in July 1723. It shows the obelisk fallen, and we've been able to reconstruct the obelisk on account of this sketch. We're standing, in fact, in just about the same position where Stukely was when he made the drawing.
I think it's terrific. I think it has absolutely nothing to do with what might have or might not have happened 4,000 years ago when the stones were put up. It might do, but we're in an area where we just cannot prove anything. There is no way of testing this hypothesis.
Dr Meaden's experiment cannot prove the existence of a prehistoric marriage of the gods. But he can demonstrate the effects of a dawn sunrise as our ancestors might have seen it. A 20th century English dawn, misty and cold.
It's now 5:30, 10 minutes to sunrise according to our calculations. We're waiting for the sun. Unfortunately, there's a lot of cloud about. We are rather thinking now the sun won't be seen in the next few minutes.
A Neolithic spring was much warmer than ours, the chance of a spectacular sunrise much greater. Today there remains only one way to defeat the weather. Dr Meaden sends for a massive 18 kilowatt spotlight to complete his experiment. This was not a midsummer ceremony. Terence Meaden believes that the Avebury marriage of the gods took place around May Day, the traditional time of fertility rites. Using basic geometry and compass readings, and taking into account the astronomical movements of the past 4,000 years, he concludes that for several days in early May, a dawn shadow cast from the phallic obelisk could have reached his goddess stone.
There's plenty of evidence for monuments incorporating seasonal alignments in the British Neolithic. We know that they herded cattle, and if you herd cattle in ancient Europe, you move them up to the summer pastures at the beginning of May, and usually there is a ceremony to bless them with fire. The Irish call it Beltane. So it is a big universal North European festival as soon as history begins. It's quite logical it would have been for those who built Avebury.
One more boy sitting there.
The effect should be just the same. The apparent diameter of the sun is going to cast a shadow in exactly the same way. The positioning is right. The obelisk is standing proud against the skyline there.
To be here with you in an attempt to see something like the effect that that great monolith would have had 4,500 years ago is thrilling.
Come on, guys, get it switched on. But they are about to do just that.
Oh, here comes a shadow. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.